Hello and welcome to Green Pass Gaming. I am your host Flap, and welcome to Thursday's podcast. We took a break last week, but we're back at it this week, and got some topics that we need to get our teeth stuck into. It's been a bit of a day globally. It's been a bit of a day with the world news that happens, but thankfully, things like our gaming hobby and our passion help us. Take us out of the real world for moments at a time, and we can enjoy the passion and gaming that we know and love, and escape into alternate realities and worlds, and thank God for that. So thank you everyone for being here. I've not been well for the last couple of weeks, so I do actually have a tickly cough. So if I need to go on mute all of a sudden, hopefully one of my GPG crew will be able to pick up the baton and run with it in my brief absence. But hopefully that won't be too much of an issue. So without further ado, let's get the GPG crew introduced to everyone. Thankfully we're here all on a fully firing GPG crew tonight, and we'll come to you first, Puxley. Welcome to the show, my friend. How's things?
Evening chat, yes. Hello everybody. I'm doing very well, thanks. Life-wise, been pretty busy. And as such, I've not spent an awful lot of time playing much. But anything I have been playing has been mainly... I've actually been getting back into Rocket League again and really enjoying that. And kind of almost out of nowhere, I still had it installed, thought I'd jump into the game. And I've been getting into that again also, which is Battlefield 5. I think after seeing all of the negative press around 2042, I saw that I had 5 still installed. I loved it when I was playing it before. I'm now been playing it again, and I've gotten into it again. And it's mainly been between those two in the very little spare time I've had. So that's basically been me, unfortunately.
Well, that's interesting because Battlefield 2042 is absolutely tanked, isn't it? I think they were down to about 3,500 concurrent players. And I think something along the back lines of Battlefield 5 was up to about 40,000 concurrent players. So I think the player base has been shifting back to a previous title, which is, quite a phenomenal move, actually. And quite sad to see. You know, no one likes to see this as a state of play in a game. I think EA have got a lot to answer for, and DICE perhaps, but... that might be something we cover a little bit later on. Scott, you're a bit of a Battlefield fan. What have you been up to?
Not playing Battlefield 2042, I can tell you that much, Flap. I think I put about an hour into that, and that was me. To be fair, I did play the beta, and it became quite apparent that it wasn't the Battlefield that I know and love, unfortunately, as someone who I put so many hours into 3 and 4 in particular. I put a lot into 1. I tailed off a little bit with 5, just with the whole World War theme growing a little bit stale for me. So I was unbelievably excited for 2042, and honestly, probably one of my biggest gaming disappointments of all time. If I can say
wow.
that. Yeah, I can't think of too many games that disappoint me more than that. I mean, to be fair, it's not like I get my hopes up too much, but I had really high hopes for 2042. So, but this week, Dark Souls has been pretty much all I'm playing. I say playing, get my ass kicked on Dark Souls for time and time again. So I've beaten 2 bosses. Obviously playing a little bit of Halo, like Pucks, playing a little bit of Rocket League as well. So yeah, it's been a decent week.
Yeah, I saw you posting about Dark Souls and some of the frustrations that obviously come along with Dark Souls and stuff. What made you play that?
I think it was the Elden Ring hype. I'm not going to lie. I think everyone's really excited for the game, and I've never really been. I say not a fan of the genre, but I've never really taken to it because I don't know. It's not something that I've thought looked particularly interesting. But I thought I could give it a shot. I got it relatively cheap. It was like £8 or something for it. So I thought, right, I picked up Sekiro as well, actually, because that was also about £8 or 9 quid. And I thought I'll give them a shot.
If you're going through the pain of it, you might as well do them all in one go, surely.
Yeah, exactly. And then I thought, so if I like them, then maybe then I can jump into Elden Ring to see what the hype is. And I think I understand it, but if I'm being honest, it's I'm getting to the end of my tether with it a little
Right.
bit because yeah, but I'm going to power through. I'm also trying to sort of make my way through Dying Light 2 at the same time as
Oh,
well, and I've literally just completed Pokemon Legends Arceus, so it's been a little bit busy
crikey.
on
Yeah,
the
you've
gaming
had a bit of
front.
a week. How you getting on with Dying Light? I mean, how far in would you say you are, considering it's a massive game?
Yeah, not too far, maybe 5 or 6 hours. So not an awful, not too far in. I'm finding some of it not great. I think some of the quests and some of the I really don't like the dialogue in it. And some of the quests like that I've done so far. I did one just before we came on tonight. It was literally go and talk to this person, then go back and talk to that person. I was like,
Yeah.
really? Like,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna stick with it.
It's kind of dialogue fetch quests. That's the pits. Well, talking
Yeah.
to we've got our resident Souls fan on board. Luke, welcome to the show, my friend. What have you been up to?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, anybody who's had a cursory glimpse of my Twitter recently will see that I've
Oh no, we're having.
I've been quite into Horizon Forbidden West. So I think I'm about maybe 22 hours into that now.
All right. Is Luke botting for everyone else? We can't hear you properly.
Yeah.
Am I okay?
It's kind of botting in and out slightly.
Am I botting still?
Sing us a song. Go on, keep talking.
Oh.
I'll put you on the spot.
I won't sing you a song. I'll keep talking.
Yeah, it is cutting out every now and again.
Is that any better?
Even in technical issues.
Maybe come back to me.
Yes.
Let me see what I can do.
Perhaps we will. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No worries. No, that's fine. Well, yeah. Let's crack on with the show, shall we? But before we do, thank you, chat, for being here. It's always fantastic to see the regular faces in the chat. We've got some people returning after a little break. Welcome back, everyone. Great to see you here. Hopefully, you get involved in tonight's topics and they spark some interest. Yeah, Elden Ring. It's coming out tomorrow. I don't know. We'll perhaps go through the panel on whether people are interested in buying it or not. But the reviews have been rolling in, and they've been taking a lot of people by surprise with just how kind of high this game is scoring. I mean, From Software has a proven track record of making quality games anyway, and obviously Elden Ring seems to be absolutely no exception to that, even given its kind of new format in the open world co-op kind of genre. But the scores for this game are ridiculously high, and some critics are actually describing Elden Ring as one of the best games ever made, with huge scores on Metacritic. It's currently sitting at 95 for PS5, 95 and 95 on Xbox and PC respectively. And on OpenCritic, it's actually currently the second highest game. Let's just quickly flash that up on the screen. It's actually on here with a rating of 96. You can't see that properly on the OBS screen, I don't think, but you can probably just make it out. We've got Super Mario Odyssey in first place on 97, and then Elden Ring second place at 96, which is quite phenomenal when you think about it. I'll perhaps come to you first, Scott, seeing as you're on your gateway games into Elden Ring. Is it something you're sort of eager to pick up?
Not necessarily. I think because I've not really had the exposure, the experience with that genre in the same way, like say someone like Luke has, it's not something that's immediately tickled my fancy. That's why I thought, right, I'll try kind of like the original in terms of Dark Souls, but I didn't want to go all the way back to Dark Souls 1 because apparently that's a little bit janky maybe these days. So a few people recommended on Twitter that if I wanted to jump into the genre, maybe to try out Dark Souls 3 as sort of a starting point.
Okay.
So I'm going to see how that goes first before picking it up. I mean, it's hard to ignore the overwhelming positivity that's coming Elden Ring's way at the moment, which is obviously great to see. We've said it numerous times in the past. We are sort of in a golden age of gaming at the moment, and sort of FromSoft being at the top of their game is part of that. So I'll see how I get on with Dark Souls 3 first. If I do end up enjoying that, because at the minute I'm still a little unsure, I'll probably end up picking it up. Yeah, because it does look really good. Obviously, it's a modern game. I've read some comparisons in terms of difficulty. which sound good. Maybe not all the way for how I would like it. I know the whole difficulty thing is quite a contentious topic within the Soulsborne community, but it does seem like they've made some changes from sort of like a quality of life or an accessibility perspective that do make it a little bit easier than maybe some of the previous games in that genre, which is really, really pleasing to hear, though maybe
Did,
not far as much as I would like.
do you think the fact that it's potentially co-op kind of eases the burden on you a little bit? Would you share it with a friend?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. I did even try that with Dark Souls 3, but it has one of the worst systems for getting into a friend's game that I've ever had the
Yeah.
displeasure of attempting. It gives you no instruction or ideas to how it can be done without a bit of Googling. And then it took me 45 minutes to an hour, and then I give up. So hopefully the co-op solution does make it a little bit better because, as someone who's new to the genre, don't maybe Fluke's free. He's got a little bit of experience. He could jump in and maybe give you a hand, and I think that'll be pretty good. Or at least give you some pointers, particularly on bosses, because they're a bit of a bitch. Those bosses in those types of games, as I've come to discover. So, yeah, anything with co-op, I love co-op games. I prefer. I would play everything in co-op if I could.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we'll see on that one.
Do you think, obviously, with these kind of level of difficulty of games, I mean, obviously playing previous games isn't necessarily going to make you good at Elden Ring. Do you think it just kind of gets you prepared mentally for the type of game that it's going to be? Because I'm a bit like you. I get quite frustrated if I have to rinse and repeat so many times, and I never get to the point of euphoria where I've actually beaten the boss because it's pissed me off so much on that journey that I just don't find it enjoyable by that point.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily mind the rinse and repeat of the actual boss fight. I think, sort of in my experience with Dark Souls so far, the rinse and repeat of getting from the nearest bonfire to the boss fight is the bit I find the most tedious. I kind of just wish you could restart the boss fight, or the bonfire would literally be outside the boss fight. I started to get the sort of the feeling that I think fans of that genre get, where you get that sort of euphoric feeling when you actually or eventually do it. But I have heard or read, sorry, on some of the reviews that came out this week, that the game does kind of expect you to have at least some knowledge of the genre going into it. There's not much hand holding for a brand new person to the genre. But at the same time, they have said it, from some of the reviews I've read as well, they have said it's maybe a good point to jump into the genre because it is kind of the most accessible of the lot. So it sounds like they've made some good strides in that direction, but maybe they've got a little further to go.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And to be honest, yeah, I was under the impression that it was perhaps one of the easier games to get into, and obviously because of the co-op aspect. Pucks, where do you sit with Souls games? I don't think you're a fan. Would Elden Ring be something that you'd consider?
No, you're right. Souls games have never really been my cup of tea personally, but I've only ever played the first one, and that was because it was a Games of Gold back on the 360 days at some particular point in time. But it was also one of those scenarios where I was playing. There's a number of other games I was playing at the time, and it was one of those games. Oh, I got it for free. You kind of turn it on, see what it's all about. It immediately didn't grab me because I didn't really know what was going on. But I didn't really give it a time of day either. But ever since I put it down, I never picked it back up again, and I've never had much interest in the other titles either. But then when I saw the first kind of gameplay trailer for Elden Ring, like late last year, whenever it was, like I was immediately taken by it. Like, wow, this looks really good, kind of thing. And similarly to how, like Ghost of Tsushima, for example, I know I've kind of praised it to high heaven on previous shows, but that was also a game where I wouldn't typically play that kind of game. But again, I saw the trailer, loved it so much that I went out and bought it on like an instinctive buy, impulsive buy, sorry, and then fell in love with it. And Elden Ring's kind of had that grip on me at the moment, and especially given the critic scores that you just showed up earlier and stuff, and obviously looking at on different reviews, that it's for a Souls type game, it's doing absolutely phenomenally well, which is you don't really see that at all for this type of game. So that's kind of what intrigues me even more. It's like, even though it's a Souls game, everyone's praising the living hell out of it, to the point where, if anything, that also intrigues me even more than I already was. I'm not necessarily in a position now to jump in because I've got a number of other games I'm currently playing, but it's definitely something I do want to pick up in the near future.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And like you say, if some of the critics are saying this is one of the best games ever made, it does pique my interest. It's like, oh right, okay, what is this hype all about? So, well, let's come to yourself, Luke. I know you've got it pre-installed, ready to go for tomorrow. What's your current levels of hype for this game?
Well, hopefully, first of all, I sound better, but fingers crossed on that one. And my level of hype is through the roof at this point, I think. Yeah, I mean, I just can't wait. I was a bit disappointed with the PC performance, or performance in general. Actually, it seems like it has some issues across every platform. From have never been like super brilliant at their PC ports, although Sekiro was pretty good. For example, they have like a 60 FPS cap in their options menu, which is just bizarre for PC, because you kind of want to push it beyond that. But anyway, but still, I'll forgive that. But I mean, in terms of the core game, I mean, the scores have only hyped me up more, and I was kind of expecting, I knew it'd be really well received, but I was expecting maybe like a 91, 92, something like that, and I thought that would be, really good. So for it to end up where it's ended up, in the high 90s is just unbelievable, particularly when you think that games now, it's harder to get a high 90 now than it was for Red Dead 2 or Breath of the Wild to get a high 90 years ago. So I'm just, I'm flabbergasted kind of by that. And, it's one thing to get that kind of score, but then for people to be saying, it's one of the in their opinion, one of the best games ever made. How can that not hype you, even if you're not like a fan of the genre or the From in general? So I just can't wait. I think it actually weirdly unlocks tonight at 11 p.m. on Steam for some reason. So I may
like Halo, I think.
Yeah,
Halo had like a global release.
Yeah,
for this.
Yeah, so I may jump in, but I'm kind of I'm a bit loath to do so as well because I'm still very much into Horizon. So it's kind of, I know. Funnily enough, this exact scenario happened back in 2016 or 17, whenever it was that Horizon came out. Which is that I got Horizon and I started playing it. I was loving it. And then Breath of the Wild came out, and I literally just dropped Horizon like a ton of bricks. And I didn't go back until I'd finished Breath of the Wild. Wow. And I feel like the same thing will happen if I play Elden Ring, basically. So I will play a little bit tonight just to get a feel for it, but I just can't wait. And I'm just so happy that it's been received as it has.
No, absolutely. And to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed seeing the frame rates on consoles as well, obviously. Xbox and PS5 were kind of looking between 45 and 60 frames a second, and even that's very inconsistent. I'm hoping some patches will come along, and obviously, like you say, you could put some serious hours into the game, and perhaps Scott, that will neatly bring us on to another sort of controversy surrounding this to a certain degree. Is that lots of reviewers with their scores clearly haven't actually completed the game, and that's been quite a thing. What's your take on this? I mean, do you think it's unfair for a score, for a reviewer to score a game before actually completing it, or do you think games are so big nowadays that it's actually par for the course and something that we're going to have to sort of tolerate going forwards?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of blown up a little bit, particularly on Twitter recently, and I think me and Luke had a sort of a brief discussion about it on Discord earlier in the week, and Luke mentioned at the time as well, and sort of I share the thoughts that you kind of know how good a game is generally within maybe 10, 15 hours if it's a super long game. It's not like we're talking about a 10 to 15 hour game that they haven't completed. I think from what I've read at least, I'm only aware of one outlet that actually completed the game, which was IGN, and I think they spent something like 80 plus hours to get the completion. Someone like Miles from Windows Central, who gave it 5 out of 5, he spent 71 hours, on his review, and he didn't complete it. Now, if you if you don't know how good a game is by the time you spend 71 hours into it, then I don't really know what to say, to be honest.
I mean, the only thing that can spoil it at that point is just a game breaking bug beyond that 70 hours, or there is a horrendous story twist, a little bit like 12 minutes, that just kind of just makes you feel deflated by the end. Short of a catastrophe, like you say, within 70 hours you should have a good feel for the game, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing is just transparency. I don't necessarily think you have to label a review without a complete story as a preview, like some people have suggested. I think as long as you're transparent and just say, look, this is how much time I put in the game, this is where I'm up to, this is how I feel about the game, I think that's absolutely fine. So I've got absolutely no issue whatsoever with reviews coming out. And I think what's telling is, of the reviews like IGN that actually completed the game, they're in line with also the reviews from the outlets that didn't complete the game, which kind of gives you an indication that there's nothing towards the end of the game that seriously spoils it. I actually had a conversation with a friend about it today, and because he was very much like, no, you can't review a game without having completed the story. And I was like, well, why? He's like, because what if something happens at the end? I was like, okay. And I would actually love chat to maybe get in here. Can any of you guys think of a game where the ending has significantly changed your score, both for good or bad? Because genuinely, I couldn't think of any. I mean, but 12 minutes, you already knew that was bad. Before
12 minutes, baby.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing. I don't think anybody went in 12 minutes and said, before they got the end, and it was a 9 out of 10 in the end and took it down to a 7. I don't see too many people saying that, but also 12 minutes is a much shorter game where the narrative was kind of the game. So it kind of makes sense there, but there aren't too many games.
Wasn't The Last of Us Part? I mean, I know obviously it still scored very highly, but wasn't The Last of Us Part 2 caught in controversy around the story?
Yes.
Wouldn't that have affected the score?
Me and Luca are on opposite sides of the fence on this one. Yeah, that game was about 10 hours too long for my liking. Go on, Luke.
Patently false, but it's just total nonsense, really, isn't it? But no, but I think that was. I think that was more affected by the user reception, and I think, I don't mean to put Flap in a minority, but I think generally, within the Twitter box there were people that were pissed off about the very early stuff and then kind of stuff in the middle. But I can't think of many games where the ending has totally ruined it.
We need to do a show about this, because I think the first half of Last of Us Part 2 is one of the best games I've ever played. It's the second half, and to be honest, not all of the second half. I get what they were going for. It just went on too long. Oh no, the first half of the game was fantastic. Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's the second half that went
on. That's interesting, because that actually. Too long, yeah. No, I mean, I've heard that criticism before. I can totally get that. I think there's two camps of people. There's people like you, which I think that's a very reasonable viewpoint to take. And then there's people who, reacted in a certain way to something that happens very early on, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And just kind of, for them, the game was dead to them from that point, and it didn't matter what it did.
That didn't bother me. That didn't bother me at all, to be honest. And without spoilers, the bit where they go to the museum was one of the best sports I've ever played in gaming. It really got me, that bit. It's like, wow. I love that.
Oh, yeah, it's brilliant.
But your mixed opinions on it. I mean, going back to the critics.
So actually, we're not that bad.
Sorry, Pax.
Sorry. No. In terms of but with all of that stuff that you've both said, I mean, did that affect the critic score, or was the general critic score decent still? I can't quite remember.
Not.
Or did that, the player being?
I mean, it still scored.
Affect the overall review.
And it didn't affect the critic score because it scored as well or nearly as well as the first game, so it was in the 90s. And I didn't see any criticisms from critics about. I think I maybe saw one that kind of, a bit of an outlier, didn't like the story or didn't like certain elements, but it certainly didn't. The outcry was more and I say outcry in quotation marks, that element was more in the community of people that played the game, broader than critics.
I've just seen a comment from BMG, by the way. Not necessarily if it affected review scores or not. This is mainly for Scott and Luke, I think. But according to BMG, the Halo 2 ending was awful.
Halo
Game
2
was
ending.
good, but the
I
ending
can't
was
even remember
bad.
what happens at the. I can't even remember what happens. It's been so long since I played it.
Similar to Luke, I'm not actually sure what happens at the end of it these days.
Yeah,
I've got that much Halo going on.
I've played that game so many times as well, but I just yeah.
Yeah, I think the main thing
Infinite
was it was
ending
such
wasn't
a
very
massive,
good.
Such a massive cliffhanger. I think I remember that being. But
Yes,
kind
I
of
remember that.
Halo.
Yeah.
I can't think of a Halo game that didn't end on a massive cliffhanger.
So,
but,
I mean, to come back to the original point, though, Scott, it's kind of like you say, there aren't too many examples out there where a game has dramatically changed so much that it would actually affect the overall score, I guess.
Can I just make one more comment?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Only because Pyro M's also put the only game that I can think of completing it will affect your overall experience would be Spec Ops: The Line. Now, I personally haven't played this game, so I can't comment. But has anyone else played the game?
I played it, but I never completed it. Blimey.
Well,
there you go. You should have completed then, because apparently that's you're missing you're missing out. But
Pyro, if you can elaborate on that and let us know, that would be interesting. Pyro's also put a review of a game only needs experience of about the first 25% to be able to give a concise opinion. I don't know. That seems I don't know. I don't think 25% is probably enough, is it?
It depends on the type of game, I think.
Yeah, because for something like Flap, me and you're a fan of Slay the Spire.
Oh my god, yeah,
aren't you?
Yeah. God, yeah.
So you've got games like that. Like those games are essentially infinite. How much time do you have to put into a game like Slay the Spire to be able to say, right, I can review this game? Games that aren't narrative heavy. How much of those games do you have to play to give a good review of a game? So I understand. It's difficult because if you play a game, within that first, let's say 4 or 5 hours, generally whether you're going to like the game. Because if you're not enjoying the game, you're just going to put it down. You're not going to. Well, I guess some people might just power through, but generally speaking, if a game hasn't grabbed me in some way in those first 4 or 5 hours, then I'm just going to put it down.
Here's one for you then, and you say 4 or 5 hours. I'd say that's very generous.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sorry, that is being generous.
So when I'm picking up Game Pass games, how well, I won't tell you mine. How long do you give a Game Pass game in terms of minutes before you make up your mind whether you're going to continue playing or not? Scott, how long do you reckon, roughly?
See, so it's difficult because I do try to research the games that I play before I play them, even if they're on Game Pass. But I would say an hour. If I'm not feeling it in the same amount, maybe 2 tops. And I'll give you a good example, actually. I don't know. I think Luke's played this. I'm not too sure whether you and Pucks have, but Nobody Saves the World. By the developers from Guacamelee. I was really looking forward to that game, and I picked it up, and I think I got maybe 2-3 hours in, and I only got that long because I was so excited for the game. I kind of forced myself to play that much, but it just didn't grip me anywhere near as much as I kind of expected it to. So I end up dropping it and moving on to something else. But I mean, easily and as low as an hour in some cases, I think is often long enough for me to make a decision as to whether it's going to be something that grips us, especially in this day and age when there's so many good games to play. If something doesn't grab you, it's the same with the TV show or a movie. If those open and if that pilot episode doesn't grab you, there's so much other good stuff to move on to that it kind of needs to get you from the off.
Well, I mean, you're more tolerant than me. Chat, let us know how long you give a game, particularly one that you're not necessarily familiar with on Game Pass, because obviously if you're paying for a game full price or even in a sale, you've normally done a little bit of homework and you're kind of sure that you're probably likely to like it. But obviously on Game Pass, it gives you the option of playing, lots of games that you wouldn't necessarily spend your own money on. So chat, let us know how long you give games I've got to be honest, I give them about 10 to 15 minutes. If they haven't grabbed me by then they're pretty much gone. And I know that
Holy
sounds
shit,
really
Flap.
harsh. Yeah, no, it sounds harsh. But to be
Sometimes that won't
honest,
even get you past the opening cutscene. It's a
Well-
good job Yakuza grabbed you nice and early, mate, because that's less of the cutscene in something like Yakuza Like a Dragon.
yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because I think Yakuza. Yeah, what was it about Yakuza that grabbed me? It was just the whole Sega feel of it. I think that there was a lot of nostalgia around that for me. Plux, how long would you give a game?
I'm kind of similar to Scott. I mean, my short answer was probably about an hour, but again, the longer answer is that it does depend. Because I know you were saying about, how long would I give a Game Pass game compared to a game
sorry.
I paid for? But then the main difference, I think, is if I've paid for a game, I already know enough about it to know that I want this game. Whereas with a Game Pass game, it's almost like a demo in a way, isn't it? That's kind of how I see it. If it hasn't, that's why the hour mark kind of makes sense. And unless it's a particular title which I maybe didn't get around to playing, knew that I always wanted to play, and then it's on Game Pass, then fantastic, I'll jump into it, and then I'll most likely stick with it until I finish it, or whatever. Outer Wilds, for example, was one for me that I wanted to play originally, didn't get around to it the first time. And then when it came back to Game Pass, I downloaded it straight away, roughly knowing what I was getting myself in for, but not too much. But then, fell in love with it and stuck with the whole thing. I think Nobody Saves the World is actually quite a good example as well, because I played the demo when that came out, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, whenever it was. And I got completely sucked into the demo and I enjoyed it, and I finished it up until the point it ends, And then it may have been because at the time I was still kind of knees deep into Yakuza Like a Dragon. But when I then when it came out and I then started playing Nobody Saves the World, maybe it's because of the fact the demo wasn't anything. It wasn't just a demo. It was almost like the first portion of the beginning of the game, and it's the same thing. So I think I kind of dropped off of it, mainly because it was like, I've done this already. I know I've done this already. I thought my progress was meant to be carried over. I thought that was a thing in the demo. Clearly, it's not, and I kind of dropped it off because of that. But then I think the other thing, for maybe it could just be me, maybe a lot of people out there, but if you've got a few games kind of on the bounce at any one time, to then add more to the mix when you've got this constant context switching going on, there could be a game that I may know I like the look of, but if my frame of mind is playing a type of game, like in my mind, I'm in the mood for playing games like Yakuza or Battlefield or Rocket League, and then I'll play, if my mind is currently occupied with maybe this small portion of genres, if I then add another one into the mix, which I've had zero experience with, it's less likely to grab me because I'm trying to concentrate on all this other backlog that I've got currently going on as well, if that all makes sense.
You know what? I am still open world fatigued from Assassin's Creed.
You know what? I am as well, actually.
And I played that over a year ago, and I'm still open world fatigued at this point.
I did actually try to get back into Cyberpunk as well, since this new update, but it's nothing wrong with the game. It's just more of the, oh man, this is going to be a huge time sink, which I don't know if I'm prepared for yet.
There's lots wrong with the game. Don't worry, Pucks. There's lots wrong with it.
Luke,
Even after the patch.
I'm interested how long you give games, Luke.
If I buy them, up to an hour. That's it. If it's on Game Pass, 10 minutes.
Wow.
If it's not something that I'm not,
brutal.
obviously, like Forza Horizon 5.
I'm the same. I don't know where you guys get all this time to put an hour into all of these games.
Well, I think it's maybe more you kind of pick and
I mean,
choose
to me, that.
Sorry, go on, Luke, Matt.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I mean, to me, like, I think the time's as valuable as money. So, obviously, I'll give the games that I buy a bit longer because I've spent money on them, so they deserve a fairer crack at it. And obviously, I don't pass. I'll give you an example, like the Gunk. So I was quite excited for that. I played 5 minutes and decided nope.
Wow.
Because it's too slow, like to begin with. It might open up, but it just if it's not gripping me that quickly, then I've got too many other games that I would spend my time on that I know I'll enjoy. So
It's interesting that you use the gunk as an example because I completed that in one session. I sat down to play it and I didn't stop until I'd see the title screen. It's interesting.
yeah,
But I think that's isn't that not a good example of about
yeah,
if the game if a particular game that you may be looking forward to doesn't quite sit with what maybe you've been what you're currently playing, and again what you're kind of mentally what you're attuned to in that moment of time. Is that the reason why? Because I loved the gunk, and I didn't finish it in one session like what you did, but I definitely did it over a few. But I can see how that first half an hour may not grip people. If you're expecting one type of game and it ends up not being that, which it isn't, then I can understand why people may feel that way.
Yeah,
I think one thing that hooks me is that I thought it was going to be like Journey to the Savage Planet, and it kind of is. And I absolutely adore that game. So I think I was probably slightly prejudiced before I'd actually started even playing the gunk and hopeful. And I enjoyed it. It was a good game. I got a lot out of it, I think.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the gunk, I really enjoyed the first sort of 30 minutes to an hour, and that sort of kept me through. I guess it really highlights the importance of, nailing the opening of a game in one way or another, whether it be narratively or whether it be mechanically, I guess from a gameplay perspective. Because, I know we're obviously only a small sample size, but we're people that play quite a lot of games. And, we're sitting here saying we maybe give games 10 minutes to an hour tops to really make an impression on us. So it really goes to show sort of how important those opening minutes in a lot of cases are. And especially
in the indie scene.
yeah, well, at the indie scene, but just with Game Pass perks, with so many games being so accessible and available to you at such short notice. I guess it's kind of like the Netflix thing, though, isn't it? There's so many things on there. If first episode of a series doesn't grab you, just move on to the next one, move on to the next one after that. Which I guess in some ways could be problematic, but I think also has the benefit of the gunk. I would not have played the gunk. I wouldn't have given it that 10 minutes to begin with if it wasn't on Game Pass.
Yeah.
So it's given me the opportunity to give
point.
that, I guess, an hour in my case, or 10 minutes in your guys' case. It's given more games the opportunity to get that chance of grabbing me in that first hour, which I think is one of the real benefits, because there's so many games like that, something like What Remains of Edith Finch, the gunk, can't think of any others off the top of my head that really grabbed me early on that I wouldn't have played if it wasn't for Game Pass. So, but yeah, it really highlights the importance of that opening hour, I guess, in a lot of cases. Which
can I add to this as well, actually, because with the comparison of Netflix and stuff, if anything, like if you're looking for something new to watch, then like with anything online nowadays, you have to go by thumbnails, for example. Like if the thumbnail, like even YouTube videos, I guess, if the thumbnail doesn't appeal enough to people, then you just don't even bother clicking it, kind of thing. And do you reckon people have that a similar way with Game Pass now? Because people obviously compare it a lot in that way to things like Netflix. If the thumbnail for a particular game they may not have heard of doesn't appeal to them, but the game could be incredible. It could be the best thing ever that they haven't played yet. But if the thumbnail sucks, they may not jump onto it. Do you reckon that's a big factor in the gaming space, or will become a thing, if not already?
Are you aiming at Puck? Sorry, is that rhetorical?
Sorry, I was kind of replying to Scott in a way, but anyone can pick it up, I guess.
I don't really know, because I guess it's a little bit different for games. I mean, well, I guess it's different just in general for all sorts of media. Gone are the days where you would pick up a DVD off the shelf and read the bit off the back. Same with a game, But I think, I mean, it's interesting actually, because for me, I don't really pay too much attention to game reviews in terms of they don't generally factor in my decision as to whether I'm going to purchase a game or not. In terms of the overall score. But actually, when it comes to TV shows, I do actually find myself looking at things like Rotten Tomatoes and things like that to, if I'm looking for something, because I'm not, I don't know if there's a TV scene, in the same way that we're obviously part of like a community here where we are constantly sort of involving ourselves in, the general narrative going on with games, whether it be, the latest previews, reviews, just news in general, kind of what we're involved in it. We're in it every day. TV, am not. A lot of what I read about TV is probably just word of mouth from things, people say at work. So I kind of have to make a little bit more effort to go out and find something to watch. Because although it is an option on Netflix, you can just flick through one. I'm not someone that's just going to start an episode of one thing and then move on to the next one. Personally, I know that a lot of people are like that, and that's kind of one of the benefits. But it's similar to games. I guess I'll try to do a little bit more research, and I'll use things like Rotten Tomatoes just to see what's popular at the time at the very least, just to give me some ideas of what to watch. Obviously, there are going to be things like in certain genres like sci-fi that I'll sort of gravitate to naturally, but yeah, it is interesting.
I've always been frustrated that Netflix doesn't have a user rating score on some of the programs, because I'd like to see what people are. I know there's a trend in, but you don't actually get to see, 4 out of 5 stars or whatever. Sorry, Pax.
I think that's because there'll be too much shit on Netflix. That's so much.
Well,
just
true.
True. Lower stars,
just saw a comment from Pyro aimed at me saying, "Have you heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover?" lol, 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 lol. Which, yeah, of course I have. But if anything, that's my point, though, because, again, Game Pass is great, don't get me wrong, but especially with indie titles, that was kind of where my point was mainly aimed at. But yeah, as you were saying, Scott, I completely agree that, gaming's obviously a different enough medium that you don't just look at thumbnails, for example. But if you're looking at, the tens and tens of indie games which come to the service over several months, and in one particular week, for example, you may get, say, 5 different indie games turn up which you may not have heard of, and at least as adults in the limited time we have to play games, you have to pick sparingly, right, and dedicate that time somewhere if you want a game. And that's kind of more the angle I was leaning towards. I don't know if I explained it very well, but at least for me, like, if I look at a number of thumbnails on the release this week kind of thing, and it's like, oh yeah, I fancy trying something new. Let's have a look. But then if I've got 5 different thumbnails in front of me, and I don't know any of them, I'm gonna go for the one that appeals to me, right? Like, it's obviously complete bias, but that's why we're all individuals, right? But I do think it has some importance still. But that's kind of my point. But no, of course, I'll try not to judge if I can help it.
No, it's interesting. I quite like how this topic has evolved, and that's interesting. Well, we're probably going to have to round this topic one up because we've been on it for nearly 50 minutes. So, it's an interesting one. That. Go on. Let's go through some of those.
Just one here from BMG who says, if a game hasn't grabbed me within the first hour, then it's dropped. My time is limited and can't waste it on games I don't enjoy or find interesting.
I think Game Pass is one of the greatest demo stores out there, because I kind of treat it like a demo store. Yeah.
Another one from BMG regarding the thumbnail things, who says, I don't look at thumbnails, I go off... Oh, this is regarding videos, but I don't look at the thumbnails, I go off the title of the videos. Fair enough. And then another one from Pyro M explaining the Halo 2 ending, who says, Halo 2's ending finished with a cutscene and no Warthog run the others had, because the development was too problematic that it couldn't be finished in time without serious delays.
Oh, okay.
And again with Pyro regarding Spec Ops. So Spec Ops The Line has a few reveals in the end that completely reframe the experience leading to it. I can't say too much about big spoilers, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay. You played it, have you, Luke?
Yeah. It has a it's got a really incredible story, actually, and it has a bit that recontextualizes everything that you've just played in a really shocking way, actually. So it's very good.
You turn out to be the bad guy or something. Well, don't answer that effect, but okay, that's interesting. Well, let's move on to topic 2. Chat, thank you very much for being here. I am trying to tame my cough, so apologies if you hear me coughing and splattering in the background. I will do my best to minimise that if I can. Topic 2, and this is kind of touching upon a topic I've wanted to cover for a little while, and this is kind of the VR gaming sphere or space, and kind of Facebook stroke Meta's input into it. It's come as quite a surprise to me that recently the Meta Quest 2 actually makes up for roughly half of all of the VR headsets being used in Steam VR, which is quite a phenomenal thing, actually, because I know VR isn't necessarily considered mainstream just yet, and still perhaps niche, but the amount of Quest 2s that Meta or Facebook are selling is quite phenomenal, and they've got 2 more products in the line, and of course we've got PSVR 2 that we've just recently seen for the first time. So VR is very much in the sort of the gaming sphere at the moment. And one thing that took me by interest actually was how Activision were actually in talks or wanted to be in talks with Facebook for the acquisition before they actually were with Microsoft. And that kind of led me to think that how we never actually consider Facebook as a competitor in the sort of gaming sphere, particularly when it comes to game development and publisher acquisitions. And if Facebook or Meta had actually purchased Activision, we could be having some very, very different kind of conversations now. And you might think, well, what, obviously, why would Meta and Facebook want someone like Activision? But bearing in mind, Facebook, Meta actually have their own platform in the Quest 2 as a standalone device. I very much see it as the kind of a bit of a Wii type gimmick or accessory where lots of people are kind of buying into it. Even casuals find that they can kind of play it on some level and enjoy the level of immersion that it gets. And obviously, it's ridiculously cheap for what you get as a piece of hardware. So I thought I'd throw it out to the chat actually, and we'll come to you first, Puxley, because I know you've got a Quest 2. Do you think Facebook are in the market to make some big acquisitions themselves to get some first-party Oculus titles under their belt?
Oh man, the short answer is no. But that's mainly because I think the Google Stadia platform, I think is a good example of this, of a company who is not a gaming company, has no inherent experience with developing or making games at all. Trying their hand at being in the games world, but then still trying to apply what's the word, like other kind of software practices, which, because game dev is such a niche in terms of the developing software, which I suppose business dev applications don't follow. It's very much a niche and breaks a lot of rules in terms of what you do and don't when making stuff. And I can't help but feel that in a way, I kind of feel that's probably where Stadia's lacked, in that because they are not gaming centric and it's not their main form of business. Seeing kind of where the Stadia platforms come after they've got the money behind them to make something successful, but if internally and in their mindsets they don't follow the game industry way, then it's doomed to fail. And I can't help but feel that no matter how much money Facebook tried to throw at something, I kind of feel maybe it'd fall into a similar vein. I know it's a bit different though, because as you mentioned, the Quest 2 is an incredible piece of hardware, and I'm having such a great time with it. And yes, it's owned by Facebook, but I mean that's on arguably a very small niche scale in comparison to the rest of the gaming industry. But we're talking about Facebook being hypothetically being in a serious running to have acquired Activision. I don't know. That just feels like a major leap forward in a company such as Facebook is absolutely massive and has the money behind it. But what I was trying to say before with the Google stuff is in the same vein. They don't have any of the experience or arguably the correct mindset to run a game dev business or to try and lead it in such a way. I mean, yes, you could try to learn from them, but then given at least at the time of the when the acquisition was happening, the whole reports of all the internal struggles and all the bad reports that we heard, what's going on internally at Activision, especially once you hear that kind of news as well, I personally kind of feel that you need someone that's got those good working practices in the industry already. And that's why I think a lot of people, I mean, I know there's a lot of to and fro's, but I think over the most of the online media that I've seen sees the Microsoft acquisition being a good thing. Because I mean, I don't work for them or anything, but at least from a lot of reports and the things that I've seen online regarding Microsoft, is that for the most part they have a very good people culture. Obviously when crunch is inevitably a thing, no matter the industry you're in. But I just kind of feel that a company like Facebook would just be completely ill-equipped to take on a company of such magnitude like Activision. Someone smaller, perhaps. I feel like in a way you should get your feet wet before you dive head first. And for me, it feels very Facebook to buy Activision just feels very much like a massive head first scenario, which wouldn't work out very well.
Yeah, no, and to be honest, Activision and Facebook don't feel like a good fit. Luke, do you think Facebook / Meta are kind of in the market to be hoovering up with some acquisitions. I mean, they've got the cash. I know there was a huge swathe of their overall capital wiped off, you know, in the region of hundreds of billions, but that probably will bounce back. But I think Pux is right. You know, I don't think there's much trust in Facebook in general, let alone in the gaming industry. But obviously, with their own platform, they are going to need to prop it up, perhaps with some first-party titles. I think they do have a couple of studios that are obviously Oculus, Sony, as far as I'm aware. But obviously, again, with PlayStation VR 2 on the horizon as well, you know, there's some tough competition coming in the VR market. Do you think Facebook are in the market for acquisitions?
Yeah, I think they are. I think there's no question about that. I mean, you know, they were seemingly willing to spend a hell of a lot of money on Activision. So, you know, they're looking out for the right thing. But I think their priorities are slightly different, because I think for them, it's not gaming per se. I mean, that's a part of it, but it's actually the metaverse stuff, right? Which encapsulates stuff beyond gaming. It's not just a gaming thing. You know, I think, as you say, they do have some first party studios anyway. I think they buy Ready at Dawn a few years ago. So, you know, and they've become a, you know, preeminent VR developer, and I think they'll look for stuff like that. But I don't genuinely ever see them becoming like a significant gaming force on the same level as, you know, your Microsofts, Nintendos, Tencents, Sonys, etc. I just don't think that the market they're looking at is that. And I know the market, you know, all of those people, you know, Microsoft and Sony, etc., that they're looking at is expanding also into metaverse concepts, etc. But it's through the lens of gaming. It's not through the lens of the metaverse. It's, you know, some other thing, some broader societal thing. So, yeah, I think they'll do stuff. I think you will see acquisitions from them, but I don't like this idea when people are like, oh yeah, well, the big threats to people like Microsoft and Sony and that sort of thing are, you know, Amazon and Facebook, because one, I don't think they see them as threats in a general sense. You know, they're very, very, the products they make right now are very niche. You know, Amazon's just publishing games essentially. It's called Luna, obviously, but it's not a big thing, and it's just publishing games, which have been quite successful in some respects, except Crucible, and Facebook are looking at a very broader environment, not just limited to gaming. You know, there's parts of the pie for everyone, and I don't think people have to fear Facebook. I mean, I fear them in the sense of I just wish they'd piss off, you know, and not get involved in any of this stuff, because they're just horrendous. But
I just have an inherent trust that they will do the gaming industry right, if you see what I mean. They're just in it for themselves. Yeah, well, I think all companies are in it for themselves in the sense of it's a business, and they're looking to, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're looking to exploit customers, right? You can exploit in a nice way, if that makes sense. You know, you're trying to get money from people. I just think with Facebook, they will not really care about the gaming community fundamentally. Like, they won't, you know, they're not going to be looking to deliver things that really will appeal to lots of, you know, hardcore gamers or traditional gamers or anything like that. What they'll be looking to do is deliver products that are exploitative, you know, in a metaverse sense, and get people hooked. And in the same way that Facebook is a product like that, right? Which is that, you know, and it's very slowly dying, hopefully. But I totally agree that they're not, you know, you don't have the confidence that they'll come into this as, you know, someone who's actually trying to make the gaming world better, you know, add to it, give some value to it. Even Amazon to some extent, even though they're not being great, you know, New World is really well received. Lost Ark has been really, really well received, you know, so they're trying to do something, like give people good games at least. I don't think Facebook are trying to do that really. No, that's interesting. And to be honest, like you say, I just don't trust Zuckerberg with making the right decisions. And I think people like Phil Spencer, Jim Ryan, Nintendo. You know, I think they do have gamers' interests at heart because they understand that gamers are their core audience. I know that sounds obvious and stupid, and I know there's lots of chat going on about particularly the historical Microsoft being cash grabbers and stuff, and it's fair to say all businesses are to some degree, but I do actually have a faith that the big heads of the three major players, as in sort of PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, do actually have gamers' interests at heart as well. I just don't get that feeling with Zuckerberg at all. Scott, what's your take on perhaps Activision potentially of going to Facebook and Meta in general?
I mean, the combination of Bobby Kotick and Mark Zuckerberg is just a dreamy combination, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, I think Activision or the shareholders of Activision, if that was a serious offer, made the right decision for the business. You look at something like Google and the acquisitions that they made, and then their decision to shut it down because ultimately they're not a gaming company. They don't necessarily know how to run these companies, and I suspect they wouldn't necessarily have the appetite to continue to invest in them as well. But yeah, that really does sound a match made in hell, doesn't it? Kotick and Zuckerberg.
Does the fact? I mean, I know you've tried the Quest 2. I know you made you feel a bit queasy, but you do get over that. Does the fact that, and this goes to the chat as well, actually, if anyone doesn't own a Quest 2 but is interested in VR, is it the fact that it's owned by Facebook stroke Meta the key factor that would put you off from buying it? Because, as Puck said, it is a phenomenal piece of kit for a phenomenal price. I mean, they're actually making a loss on it. The store that they have is bloody brilliant. It is just brilliant from start to finish. I'm not suggesting there isn't better out there, and the PSVR certainly will be a step forwards in that regard. But is the fact that it's owned by Meta stroke Facebook stroke Zuckerberg the key factor in deciding not to jump into this sphere?
Can I just quickly add to this as well? Because BMG's actually already given you an answer to this one. And they've said that they don't have Facebook or other products, and PSVR 2 is a day one buy, and he won't touch VR until then.
That's kind of what prompted the question, to be honest. I'm just interested to hear Luke's take on it, because I know he hasn't got a Quest, and Scott's take, and Luke's, because I know Luke was kind of potentially in the market for a Quest 2 as well at some point. But Scott, is that because it's Facebook owned?
Yeah, part of it for me is I wouldn't touch a Meta product with a 10-foot barge pole, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, admittedly, just the hypocrite must admit that I do use WhatsApp, but that's only out of necessity almost these days, because it's so sort of ubiquitous amongst everyone. But I won't use Facebook, Instagram, or any of their products. I mean, the fact that Facebook sold that Facebook Portal device, which is a camera into your house, and the fact that people bought that still to this day absolutely blows my mind that people are willing to put a Facebook camera in their home. But yeah, that is part of it. But it's not the whole thing. I still think VR as it stands is relatively immature, at least in from my perspective. But I guess that maybe is coming from a position where I've not had a chance to play some of the more refined experiences. Half-Life Alyx maybe being the prime example. I did have a brief try of a Quest over Christmas when I visited some family, and yeah, it made me sick. But yeah, I only played it for maybe 30 minutes tops. Not even 30 minutes. It was probably more like 4 minutes. I had a couple of shots though before I kind of give up. But I think where I see VR personally is, and the advantage that I think Quest has over PSVR and the other headsets in the PC space, is the fact that it's wireless. Completely wireless. And I think that's one thing that I think, for it to become truly mainstream, I think they do need to find a solution that allows it to be completely wireless. Obviously the PSVR 2, which we'll probably come on to in a moment, is down to sort of one wire, which is going to improve the experience, I'm sure. But I still find, to me personally, I just find the idea of playing games with a helmet on and not having any sort of awareness of my surroundings actually a little bit unsettling, I think. And so it's not something that if the PSVR 2 was wireless, it probably still wouldn't be something I'd be that interested in, just because VR doesn't appeal to me too much. But obviously that might change when I get to experience something as good as maybe Alex.
It's interesting you
example.
say. I mean, the Quest 2 is wireless, even with PC VR. You can hook it up wirelessly, which is just phenomenal. And Half-Life Alex is it's just an experience. I wished I could take you all on the same journey that I've been on in that game, because it is both frustrating, it is delightful, it is shit your pants scary. It is so many things, and for me personally, it's like the next level of game, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I hold things in my hand and look at them in front of my face, and I almost struggle to believe it's not real, and that my hand isn't actually holding the gun or whatever it is at the time. It really is that kind of experience. It's interesting you say about knowing your surroundings, though, because there are settings within, I guess it's a Quest thing, but I'm sure other headsets do it as well, where you can get, it will actually pick up on physical objects and just put a very faint outline, so you kind of know where they are in the room, if that makes sense. But they kind of have thought about that. But yeah, Luke, what's your experience with VR? I know you did consider a Quest 2, but obviously with PSVR 2 on the horizon, and I've got to be honest, I'm probably a day one purchaser of that as well. Yeah, what's your take on VR and the future of it as a gaming platform?
Yeah, so I mean, I had a PSVR. For the longest time, I wanted something in the PC space, but it my interest in it kind of dropped off as I saw that there weren't many. I think, as Scott said, one of those kind of big experiences that really drew me to actually wanting to pick one up. I did look at the Quest 2. And I think it's a really cool piece of technology, but for me, I'm not that bothered about the wireless element. Like, as long as it's a one wire, which PSVR 2 is, then that was all I was really bothered about. And beyond that, I think you just know that Sony will support it pretty well. Like, you'll get really good experiences out of that headset, because you've got the backing of PlayStation, who have all the studios and have various studios just working on VR games, I'm sure. So
yeah, you've kind of wandered inadvertently into my next question, because the only AAA title that kind of exists in the VR space really is Half-Life Alyx, and Sony will be bringing many more, hopefully.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that's kind of, and I tried VR maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I remember trying some electronic shop, they were doing like a HTC Vive experience when it was just coming out, and it was just before it was releasing, and they kind of paraded it around. I remember experiencing it for the first time, and it was just this arena shooter, and it had some other bits in it. It was only like a mini game thing, but it absolutely blew my mind. And I remember thinking at the time, this is the future. And I think to some extent it is the future, but the future where that coexists with a traditional gaming experience. I don't think we'll, maybe in 1,000 years we'll get to the point where traditional gaming experience is completely replaced. But in our lifetimes, I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, Quest 2, really cool piece of tech. Have been tempted, but at this point, I'm just going to wait for PSVR 2.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you, and I'm in exactly the same boat, to be honest. And like you say, it's not a massive leap forward in terms of feature sets and stuff, but it is certainly moving the whole format forward in some way. I'm quite looking forward to the face haptics. That sounds quite intriguing and terrifying in equal measures, and obviously the wider field of view as well, because like Scott was saying, it kind of is still in its infancy to some level, but it's certainly usable and playable. It doesn't feel clunky anymore, if that makes sense. It's quite a smooth and flowing experience, because obviously on the Quest 2 you can do 90 or 120 hertz, and obviously if you've got a pretty beefy PC, you'll be able to get the best out of some of those games as well. But Pucks, we'll let you finish up this one, because obviously you've got a Quest 2 as well. What's your thoughts and feelings on the sort of future of VR and where PSVR 2 will sit in this kind of field?
I think, given I know Quest 2's been out for a little while now, but it's kind of definitely boomed around the holiday season just gone, if not just before that and afterwards as well. And if anything, regardless of who's making it, I think we're definitely seeing proof that the technology is definitely catching up to, I think, a lot of people's expectations. And I think when the first headsets started I think when they was first being demoed and coming out around, was it 2014 or that kind of time? I think the idea that you needed to have not just the expensive hardware, but you had to have a super beefy PC to be able to play games at the time. Because again, it's all brand new. Everyone's still trying to figure it all out. And on top of that, you're hardwired in, and you needed the room space to be able to do stuff. Because most people have their PCs in arguably a relatively small like office space or something. So most of the people, a lot of people, I'd imagine, don't have all that room. But technology's now advanced a lot since then, and the fact that you've got something like the Quest, which I think Scott already mentioned, you're completely wireless, it's battery run, I can be wherever I want, set up my barrier so I know I'm not going to hit anything. I can physically crouch and stand up in a shooting game, and it is phenomenal. And I know there's been, I think it was at CES earlier this year, in early January, I think they had a VR booth for anyone who watches that kind of content on YouTube or whatever. There's a ton of VR headsets from other manufacturers, which are, yes, arguably super expensive, but at the same time are kind of showing what the future is, if that makes sense, in terms of what they're capable of. And things like gloves, for example, which have what's the word? Sensors isn't the right word, but like actuators, that's the kind of term. Like actuators in these gloves, so that if when you're touching an object in a game, you can actually feel where that is on your physical hand, kind of thing.
Haptic feedback kind of thing.
Yeah, and another thing which already surprises me, or pleasantly surprising me on the Quest, is that because I think they've also got some partnership with is it Leap Mind or something, like the hand, like finger index tracking thing as well. So my virtual hands I can see on the controller, for example, if my index fingers say just resting on the trigger, my in-game finger will be in that position, and when I lift it up, it will kind of lift it up that way. And with the thumb as well, like the thumb will track what button I'm highlighting if I've pressed it, am I over the analog stick. And this is just like, arguably I'd say, even though VR's been around for a while, this is the beginning, I think, of a new era of VR. And I think given its ease of introduction to a lot of people, the price is very competitive now compared to what it was a couple of years ago. So a lot of people are experiencing and realizing it. They're sharing it with their friends, and for the most, a lot of people who are, able to hack it. 'Cause I know there's a number of people who, VR just completely throws them out and makes them feel ill, which can't be helped, unfortunately. But for the most part, more and more people are getting introduced to it, and an augmented reality as well, alongside virtual reality, is also starting to catch up, and technology there is getting ever better. So yeah, no, I think the future is very exciting, and it's really looking forward to seeing kind of where it goes next, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and hopefully Sony will take it the next step forward. And I know there's a Quest 3 and there's also a Quest Pro in development, but there are many other VR manufacturers out there as well, kind of trying to push the format. And I think the one thing that's actually lacking, and although I'm about to say this, there are some I have played games that I did not even know existed. In fact, I downloaded Psychonauts Ruins of the Rhombus yesterday on Steam, and it's a VR-only game. It's an actual Psychonauts VR game that I didn't even know existed. The Rhombus of Ruins, is it? I can't remember which way around it is now. And I was like, oh my God, this is so fantastic. It's like walking straight into a brand new world of gaming with some of the games that are out there from studios I've never heard of, experiences I never even dreamt would have existed. And it's a phenomenal thing, and I'm quite excited to see where it goes. Like Luke says, it's not going to take over 2D or flat gaming, as they call it. I don't think, not anytime soon, but it would be quite nice to see it live in sort of concurrently alongside that. And I guess my real question at the top of the topic really was, would Facebook have, if the Activision deal had gone through, and thank God it didn't, would they have kind of done what hopefully Xbox are going to do and keep Call of Duty and the other sort of things multi-plat, or would they've stolen it all for themselves and tried to, pump it all into the metaverse? I'm guessing that's a question we won't really ever know the answer to, thank God. But that's where we are. Pugs, is there any comments we need to catch up on?
I know there's been a lot earlier, which I kind of missed and flicked up. I've got a few saved here, though. One here from Pyro M. This was earlier on, I should add. But so too many people still have the mindset that Facebook games are those mobile games like things from Zynga, such as Farmville, which, again, things like Quest 2, the games are getting
Yeah.
better and better.
And I come back to that actually, and that's a good point because I think that's the mindset of people as well. And I'm just worried that, and a little bit like Luke was alluding to earlier, Facebook could actually swoop in and get some of these devs and publishers to God knows to what end, and we could actually end up losing some of these franchises to the Meta gaming platform. And although obviously with a Quest 2 it wouldn't necessarily directly affect us, it could be horrendous for gaming at large. And they like I say, they seem to be the hidden competitor out there that no one's talking about, I guess.
Yeah, no, if you want to come back to that, that's fine. I'll just finish. I've got two more saved here I'll read out. So one is from BMG, who said, I had a PSVR 1 and loved it. They had fun, awesome games and connected me to people from all over the world. Felt like I was there in person on the bridge of a Star Trek starship having a laugh with friends.
Yes, now that is a multiplayer, kind of an MMO, and you need other people playing online, unfortunately. I think the game's kind of died a little bit now, but I would have loved that back in the heyday as well.
And then lastly, from Pyro, I've got another one saying, not interested in VR myself, despite, since 2004, I've wanted an augmented reality Yu-Gi-Oh game to play, to play Yu-Gi-Oh and see the monsters overlaid onto reality.
I'm with them on that one. I would love something.
That would be quite cool, actually. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, and one of the other experiences I can have is like Skyrim. When you're actually talking to people in Skyrim in VR, and they are absolutely life-size, it is just a really bizarre but fantastic experience. There's just no words that can describe the experience when you're in these sort of worlds doing these sort of things. And like
I suppose just to add, I mean, given what you're saying, I mean, you and I have played a game called Zero Caliber.
Yep.
And actually, that's the only one we've played together actually so far. But yeah, the idea that I can, I'm looking at your virtual...
We did Contractors.
Oh, we have done some Contractors, yeah. But yeah, it's such a bizarre but kind of nice feeling in a way that you're the virtual person, but when I can see I can see your physical hands moving even though I'm not. Do you know what I mean? It's such a weird thing to describe to people. But it's good fun.
And the other thing is, with that first time you realise you can physically duck for cover, behind cover, when you're getting shot at.
Yeah, that trips you up at first. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Let's round off topic 2 if we can. There, I am starting to get more and more chesty, as you can probably hear, so I do apologise. Thank you for sticking with us, chat. Some fantastic chat tonight. Thank you everyone for being. Let's just do a quick roll call. Pyro M, thank you. Stubbs, thank you for being here. BMG, as always, long-time supporter of the show. Thank you for being here. We do get the odd bot and trolls in there that we try and deal with fairly quickly, but they are a little bit annoying sometimes. My Secco, I think that's kind of it. Scrolling up, but thank you very much for being here, everyone. And with that, we'll move on to topic 3 and probably come straight to you, Luke, if that's okay. Now, I've actually kind of called the topic, is ray tracing just a gimmick? And I'm coming to you first because you've got an RTX 3080. You've probably got, out of all of us, the beefiest machine that's able to actually run ray tracing. So I thought I'd come to you with this first. But this is kind of on the back of the recent update for Cyberpunk, and that it now has a ray trace shadow mode. But sadly, it runs at 30 frames a second only. And I can't imagine a world where anyone would actively choose to turn on ray traced shadows and run the game at 30 frames a second rather than the sort of performance mode at 60. Interesting to hear your take on this. With a powerful PC that can actually run games with ray tracing, do you still think ray tracing is a gimmick, or do you think it's kind of the way forward, and that, how many generations are we off in console terms to having sort of full-blown 60 frames a second ray tracing? And that's quite a big question, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So, and I felt like the Cyberpunk. I completely agree with you with the Cyberpunk next quote unquote next gen update. I for that specifically, I was expecting them to maybe get ray trace reflections in the game at a minimum, and then probably leave it at that. To only have shadows in, and I should add as well that the shadow option wasn't an original option in Cyberpunk, so there weren't ray trace shadows, at least not as a tickable option. They've now introduced that into the PC version as well, so you can enable that additionally. So they've actually gone out of their way, weirdly, to create a form of ray tracing for this patch, which in one way is commendable. In another way is kind of disappointing, because nobody cares about that in terms of ray tracing. That only really helps if you have like all other forms of ray tracing going on, so ray trace, global illumination, and all of that stuff, because it helps add to the scene at any given time. And I mean, as I say, I've got a really good rig, so I'm in a position where I've played Cyberpunk at 4K with DLSS, I should say, because it's very demanding. At 60 frames per second with all the ray tracing enabled, including reflections and lighting and stuff like that. And it looks amazing. I mean, it's an amazing looking game still. In those circumstances, absolutely, I think ray tracing's the future. The issue is that it is incredibly demanding. And even for... even for a 3080 or 3090, even for overclock versions of those cards, they are still limited. They can't do native 4K, 60 FPS ultra settings with ray tracing. You just can't get that. You can get good, decent playable frame rates, but you can't get 60. It's really hard. And the consoles are even more limited, because even though they're very powerful, one, they're using AMD's hardware accelerated ray tracing, which isn't anywhere near as good, frankly, as Nvidia's. And two, they've got an APU that's competing for a lot of different power priorities. And it's there's only so much they can do. Now, I think there's been some games this generation on consoles from a ray tracing perspective that I think have been super impressive, actually. So ones that come to mind are Ratchet and Clank. That is has incredible ray trace reflections, which I really think add to the game. And it can do it in a performance mode at 60 FPS. There's Metro Exodus, which has full ray trace GI, looks amazing, and it's doing it on console at 60 FPS. And Spider-Man Miles Morales, that was another one, right? Great ray trace reflections, again.
Yes, that's true.
Do it performance on 60 FPS. So I think there are games out there that show that it can be done on consoles and look great, and I think it is the future of rendering, but I think they are still limited, and every developer has obviously competing priorities about what they want to put in the game and what effort they want to go to with certain things. I think Call of Duty had ray trace shadows as well, didn't it?
The strange thing is the Call of Duty Cold War had ray trace shadows at 60, or if you turn them off, you could actually run the game at 120.
Okay, right, cool.
Which was how I played it. I played it at 120 because I turned on the ray trace shadows to have a look, and they're just slightly sharper shadows. Who gives a shit about that?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. It's not a huge visual impact in isolation. With other stuff, it is, but I think we're probably at least. In terms of getting all games to just have ray tracing in them, particularly across the most demanding, elements, GI, etc., we're probably at least 2 generations out from that, maybe a generation if we get a big leap next time. And I think for path tracing, which is the sort of holy grail of ray tracing, we are a long way from from getting that. Definitely in a lifetime we will, but we're a long way. I don't think it's a gimmick or that it's not good, because it is, and I think it's really commendable what some developers have done with it on consoles, in particular this generation, already. So, and I imagine it will only get better as the gen goes on. But I think that it is disappointing when you hear about next gen ray tracing, and then all you get is some sharper shadows. And the trade off is you lose 30 frames. Nobody's going to pick. Who's going to pick that? Nobody's going to pick that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess I'll come to you next, Scott, if that's okay. I guess when I said is ray tracing a gimmick, I think what I meant was, are game developers wasting their time trying to squeeze in a ray tracing mode of some sort, be it shadows, whatever, trying to squeeze it into games when perhaps their time is better spent on perhaps improving the performance mode and things like that? Is it a gimmick so they can just say, that there's a ray tracing mode that will, get destroyed in Digital Foundry's breakdown of it and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one of those things that was actually pushed by both Xbox and PlayStation. I think at the beginning of the generation, though, wasn't it? The kind of the fact that the hardware was capable of ray
Well,
tracing.
it's a
So I wonder
sales
how,
tack, isn't it? That's the thing.
yeah, exactly. But I wonder sort of how much that being pushed has impacted developers' sort of appetite to incorporate that in there. Obviously, the hardware is capable of it. Maybe one of the issues that they've got is obviously they're powered by AMD hardware, which is significantly further behind NVIDIA in terms of its ray tracing capabilities. But um, it's difficult because Luke obviously listed some really good examples of where it has worked, but those ultimately have been on PlayStation, I think, or at least the two big examples in terms of
Mm.
Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man, where they've looked good. I mean, the Call of Duty example, I don't think personally adds anything to the experience, but it's something that I've not really had too much experience of. We spoke about it before the show. Not I actually can't think of a game where I've played it. So sort of all my exposure to ray tracing has been things that I've seen on things like YouTube and things like that, or PC gameplay footage, and it looks amazing when it's done. I know Luke just touched on path tracing there. I remember when I first saw the Minecraft path
Yeah,
tracing
yeah.
demo. I don't know if you recall that. That was truly something special. It was mind blowing. But we're obviously a long, long way away from that. And ultimately, the current hardware that we've got probably isn't, well, I say probably, it isn't, unfortunately, powerful enough to really give us an experience, at least in my opinion, that I would say the trade off is worth having that ray tracing in. Often, or in most cases, you have to sacrifice. Other elements, particularly frame rate, to achieve that. And from my perspective, I'm never going to choose. I know some games do offer it as well. We should obviously say that, but in most cases, the higher graphical quality, including ray tracing, comes at a cost of frame rate. And I'm in a position now where I'm not going to choose 30 over 60 in any scenario. It doesn't matter how bloody good the ray tracing looks. The frame rate and the performance from that perspective is still more important to me. So I'm hoping it's something that maybe in the next generation or the generation after that, as the hardware advances, and particularly as AMD's ray tracing capabilities improve, we'll be in a position where more people will be able to experience it. Because at the moment, it's kind of similar to VR in a sense, obviously different, but it's almost niche in a way. Very few people get to truly experience what ray tracing is in the same way that VR is relatively niche as a product, and that's because the barrier to entry is still too high. If you want a 3080, good luck getting one of them these days. Even some of the lower cars are still outrageously expensive and still out of a lot of people's reach. So yeah, maybe in the next generation or two, we'll be in a place where it's going to be sort of normal and part of every game, but we're still some way off, as Luke mentioned.
It's interesting. We've got the 40 series cards coming by the end of the year, I believe. So it's going to be interesting to see what, if kind of leap they've made on the ray tracing front. It's interesting, Luke, actually, and I'll come to you, Pucks, if that's right. It's interesting that Luke said, two of the sort of de facto examples that he used were Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man, both obviously first-party Sony titles. I think Microsoft and any of their game studios are actually yet to blow our socks off with any kind of ray tracing in any of their first party titles, to be honest. Now, obviously, we don't know quite what's coming in terms of ray tracing in Microsoft first party titles, but it's just yet another demonstration of how well Sony and PlayStation first party studios kind of squeeze everything out of their particular box, if that makes sense. Is ray tracing something you're interested in? You've got a GTX card. Would you consider upgrading it to an RTX just for the ray tracing capability it does on your PC?
When the prices come down, sure.
Right.
But I'm definitely in no position to be spending £800 plus on just a graphics card. Got much more important things. Money has to go elsewhere, I'm afraid, before I can buy more expensive toys for myself. But I mean, in that particular scenario, though, for myself, it wouldn't just be the graphics card at that point. It'd end up,
No, but the essence of the question and the answer, I guess, that you're giving is that ray tracing itself isn't enough of a draw for you to commit to it, financially, I guess.
No, it's not at the moment. And I suppose the other thing is, I mean, outside of, if we're talking PCs, it's an upgrade to a GPU is only the beginning. It's not the full picture, is it? Because you're still going to need like a decent monitor to be able to even notice it. If you're pairing a ray tracing capable super duper graphics card with as the Zone 24-inch LCD display, you're not going to see any benefit, obviously. But so there's kind of, I'd argue, like a few hidden costs here and there. I mean, but yeah, if you've obviously got all the financial means to do so and get it, then 100% I would do. But the reality is I don't quite yet, and I'm in no rush to do so, if I'm perfectly honest. I think, I mean, Sony is a very good example of, those two games were very good examples of, companies that are doing it very well. And I do wonder if it's because, Sony, or I know it's the developer's point of view, but Sony obviously having a lot of knowledge in the displays space and obviously manufacturing their own, I can only imagine that they may have obviously been able to potentially borrow some of that knowledge on how to best utilize ray tracing on displays as well, because obviously it's not just enable ray tracing, it looks good. You've obviously got to do some handshaking between hardware as well to get it to look as good as it does. And there's obviously some magic happening underneath the hood to make those particular titles stand out. But no, it's all going to be very exciting for the future. But why haven't Microsoft done it yet? Don't know. Maybe they're just waiting for the right time. Maybe they didn't have the expertise, or maybe they felt that the technology wasn't quite ready yet. I think we said there's a lot of games that have come out on Xbox since, but arguably there's many more bigger hitters which are coming, and I think a lot of developers as well are still getting used to the current tech, if that makes sense. Getting things optimized for the system. What is it capable of? How well can they push it? And we've said this right before these consoles launch as well, that we're not going to be seeing anything drastic in the graphical fidelity space, at least until arguably late year 2, year 3, and we're kind of at the beginning of that stage now. So I'd like to think within the maybe from next year onwards, we'll probably start seeing, like, in terms of actual ray tracing capabilities and running well, or beginning to run better. I'd like to think that we're going to start seeing those soon. But it is exciting.
I think another thing in Sony's favour is that their games kind of favour ray tracing a little bit, because Microsoft have many RPGs, open world RPGs on the go, and I just don't think you're not going to see ray tracing in a game like the next Elder Scrolls for, like Luke says, for many years. It's just to do that in an open world environment is just way beyond. Whereas something like Ratchet and Clank, kind of an on the rails kind of shooter, and even Spider-Man to some degree. I know it's kind of open world, but there's lots of tall buildings and stuff. You don't get to see huge vistas at the same time on the screen. It's all quite close quarters when you're swinging through and stuff. So perhaps it does kind of favour the Sony games as well to some degree. And there's some chat going on as well about the physical tech inside both the PS5 and the Series machines. Obviously, it's an AMD GPU. And for me, I've got a 2060 Super RTX, and the one thing that makes a huge difference to frame rates, which actually allow me to sort of dabble into the ray tracing, is actually DLSS 2.0 on lots of games. It's a huge game changer in terms of frames per second. I guess you see the same, Luke.
Oh yeah, it's a magic trick of tech. DLSS. It's just not only the frame boost that you get from using it, but the fact that image quality remains almost, I mean, especially 2.0, almost imperceptible from native resolution unless you're zooming in. It's incredible. It's really incredible. And unfortunately, that's something that could be used on the console side in FSR, but FSR is garbage at the moment. Inferior. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. It would be interesting to see, if the console manufacturers had gone for an NVIDIA GPU. I'd love to have seen, parallel universes, perhaps, just see them side by side, just to see the difference that we would be getting in terms of performance. But I'm guessing AMG, at the end of the day, came in cheaper and probably have a better working relationship with both Sony and Microsoft at the time. But
Yeah. The thing is really when it comes to the hardware flap is obviously these consoles are powered by APUs, not a CPU and a separate GPU, and Nvidia aren't in that space, at least at this power
No, that's
level.
true.
Obviously, they've
Yeah, of
got
course.
APUs that they use obviously for the Switch and their other devices, but they're nowhere near powerful enough to power the type of hardware that the Series X and the PlayStation 5 are powered by. So they kind of really don't have any other options to
Well,
be perfectly honest.
apart Intel seem to be moving into the GPU market fairly soon as well. Apparently, there's rumors around that going around.
Yeah, but they've got their what they call them again. I actually can't remember the bloody names. They've got weird names, but they've got
Is
their
it something Lake? Is it something Lake? I can't remember.
so I think
No, you're talking
I
about the
think that's a
memory
CPU
boost thing, aren't you?
architecture.
Yeah.
Oh,
Quantum,
what the
Intel
bloody
Quantum
hell
or
is
something?
it?
No, they're moving into the GPU. They're moving into GPU as well.
Yeah, they are, and they've got the first ones that are common are just kind of like improved integrated graphics, which kind of will I guess rival AMD sort of 6000 series that has sort of RDNA 2, which is sort of similar stuff that's powering the Steam Deck. But yeah, they've got their sort of their full Alchemist, that's it. Apologies. So Alchemist is kind of the project name or the code name for their first desktop GPUs. So those are supposedly coming later this year. So that has an option. I guess that might be an option. But as a new player to the space, I do wonder where they're going to be at in comparison.
Yeah.
Obviously, a competitor in that space, they're likely to be behind.
So they're going to be so far behind, aren't they? It's yeah.
Yeah, but then you've also got you're weighing it up. A change to a completely different chipset for the next generation. What does that? How does that impact things like compatibility,
Backwards compatibility? Yeah, exactly.
Familiarity and things like that. So, I don't see if at least for the next generation or two where they move away from what they're currently using. Obviously, the hope is in the future that AMD's ray tracing capabilities improve in some way, and then maybe the technology that they use, like FSR, it is also improved to give more performance to ray tracing. But we'll just have to see. It's kind of one of those things, isn't it, where like the new hardware, it's such a leap over the previous generation, but very quickly you realize like yes, they're powerful, but especially when you compare to the PC space, there's just another level. And considering how quick the PC space works from a hardware perspective, from a hardware perspective as well, they're always going to be playing catch up.
No, absolutely. No, that's interesting. Well, got a couple of other very small topics that we can cover just before the end of the show, and perhaps we'll stay with you, Scott. Street Fighter 6 was that a surprise? I guess not really. I know there was a countdown, and we're coming up to an anniversary, and so I'm not sure that was much of a surprise. But
no,
are you
not
Street Fighter fan?
Not so much. I think part of the problem is obviously Street Fighter 5 was exclusive to PlayStation. I used to play Street Fighter quite a lot when I was a kid, but I haven't played it so much recently. So not a surprise. The only thing it really could have been is Street Fighter or something Resident Evil related, but then the timing sort of lined up with the Street Fighter Cup ending very shortly beforehand. Honestly, I think it was really disappointing that they did a countdown to a 30-second reveal trailer like that with very little information. I think if you're going to hype it up to the point of doing a countdown, then have a little bit more to show, or just don't count down and have it as a nice sort of reveal at the end of the tournament that they had going. So the interesting thing was probably just a lack of platforms. Obviously 5 was exclusive to PlayStation. They've not announced any platforms for 6 yet. So I'd be curious if it comes to Xbox. I'll definitely be picking it up.
Yeah, that was a surprise that they didn't actually. But I'm guessing you're not much of a Street Fighter fan, Luke?
No. No, I'm not. I did play 5 a little, not much. I always kind of try and experienced them a bit, but there's no fighting game that's ever hooked me apart from years ago when I was really into Tekken when I was a lot younger. But I think that was kind of like a thing that everybody did at that age on PlayStation if they grew up. If you were around that era. So I agree with Scott. To have like how long was it was a week.
It was a week long countdown.
Yeah, and then to reveal 40 seconds of it, and then the worst Street Fighter logo I've ever seen. To do that kind of felt crap. You know what I mean? Like, it did not feel good. And then to not even announce platforms, so you're in this position where people are kind of wondering, is it coming to multiple platforms? We had the Capcom leak, which suggested it will, but then they didn't announce that. So yeah, just a bit of a bizarre one. And I think after kind of Street Fighter 5, and I know that eventually became a success for Capcom, but it feels like they kind of needed the goodwill a bit more on this one right from the off, to really make it a big success. And they've kind of started at the opposite. They've kind of gone back. So they need to reveal it and have it be really impressive for people in that community. And then, let's see. It was just a weird one. I was in my head, obviously, I wanted like Resident Evil 4 remake and Dragon Dogma 2, but I knew they weren't coming. I knew they weren't going to announce that there, so I knew it'd be Street Fighter, unfortunately.
Any interest in the fact that it's being made in RE engine, Luke? Which is a bit of a departure.
From a purely graphical, technological perspective, very interested in that, and so I'm looking forward to actually seeing it. I hope it looks amazing. I think it probably will look really nice.
I really disliked Logger 5. I really hated the art direction that they took with 5.
I didn't particularly like it.
Maybe a different direction. So,
Yeah, and we got some news in around, is it PlayStation PS Spartacus? It's on our Discord channel that you've put on there, Scott.
So this has come courtesy of Mr. Jeffrey Grubb. He just kind of revealed a little bit more information about Spartacus and its supposed tiers. So have a quick look at Discord or have a look at Jeff Grubb's Twitter. But essentially, he's sort of gone into a little bit more detail about what's included in the 3 tiers. Tier 1 being essential at $10, tier 2 being extra at $13, and tier 3 being premium at $16 per month. And essentially, it's kind of just PS Plus combined with PS Now, with premium sort of being everything, including game streaming, classic titles. He didn't elaborate on that too much, as well as the current sort of PS Plus offering. So it honestly sounds to me more like a rebranding and a combination of the services rather than anything too wild. The most interesting thing is maybe the idea of possibly game trials similar to EA Play, where maybe rather than having them day and date, you can maybe get a 10-hour trial of, say, the latest game. But yeah, probably still need to wait and see on that one. But doesn't sound quite like maybe the Game Pass killer, dare I say, that some people may be expecting.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if I can quickly capture a screenshot of it so we can flash it up on the screen. So bear with me. Let me just quickly try and do that. It does seem the pricing seems quite close, doesn't it, to Game Pass? I'm guessing it. They are trying to target.
I don't think it does, because Game Pass is it $8 a month or $10 a month? Obviously, I'm not too sure what it is.
No, it's 11, isn't it? £11.99.
No, not for Game Pass buy. So that's all. So Game Pass is probably about $10 a month, I think, in the States. And obviously that gives you everything in Game Pass, including day one games. Their essential tier, which is essentially just PS Plus, and obviously it gives you online as well, to be fair, but that's essentially just the monthly games, is going to be $10. So it kind of doesn't seem, in terms of value offering from a games perspective, obviously they're slightly different in terms of one offers online and one doesn't. That's it. So essential, which is $10 a month, is just currently what is PS Plus, and $10 a month seems a bit expensive, although I imagine they'll have obviously yearly tiers as well. That will be cheaper.
It's interesting when they say monthly games. Do we think monthly games are getting added like they do for PS Plus now then? So there'd be like 2 or 3 a month. Yeah.
So PS Plus Essential, from what I can gather, is essentially just what PS Plus is currently. And then PS Now is being rolled in as extra tiers as part of PS Plus. It's kind of in terms of the extra and the premium.
Here's one.
That's where the game catalog part comes from, isn't it? Because you'll be able to download PS4 games that are on the current Now service, and then obviously with the streaming is when you stream your PS3 titles. And I assume by extension, in classic games, is that the PS1, PS2 stuff that got rumored months ago?
Well, I'd guess so.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I've got an interesting one for you, Luke. I mean, the difference between £13 and £16 a month's negligible, but which would you go for? Because I'm really not interested in the streaming classic games or the game trials, so I might even just plump for the PS Extra on that, because I don't think the extras would be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I don't. I intermittently subscribe and don't subscribe to PS Plus now, because really I don't do much online gaming on my PlayStation, and the monthly games are cool and really good, but most of the time, but I don't know. I think. I would. So the scenario I would go for is I would absolutely get premium if they were introducing more multiplayer games, funnily enough, and I'm not a big multiplayer fan, because at least then you feel like you've got your value because you need it to play, premium multiplayer games. So if they did that, say Factions 2, for example, I'd probably go for premium, although I kind of have to see, because I don't, I look at the extras on it compared to PS Plus Extra, and I think I'm like you, where I'm like, well, streaming, I mean, I'm not interested in.
No,
classic games, potentially.
Play them all.
Potentially, depending on... but like, depends on what they offer, right? How do they perform? If I have to play... If Shadow of the Colossus is on there, but it runs like Shadow of the Colossus back when Shadow of the Colossus released on PS2, I'm not really going to be interested in playing that. So, and game trials, you know what I mean? Like, I don't really care about that. So, I'd probably just go for PS Plus Extra. The minimum I'd hope is at least, and they probably won't do this, at least not for a while, is if they're going to do a game catalogue thing and have it in PS Plus rolled into one and kind of focus on it more. First, obviously, you'd want more recent games to be coming out. And we saw that the other day, Shadow Warrior 3 is coming, right? Which is a cool little, cool game that they're getting. That's cool. But I'd want it to operate a bit more like EA Play actually operates now, which is to say that, within a certain time period, your first party games are coming to that service, and it's not, we'll bang Days Gone in day one, or, we'll put Zero Dawn in, Forbidden West in like 3 years after it releases. It's just not good that way, it's not worth it. So yeah, I'd probably go for PS Extra.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think PS Premium does anything for me. They need a lot more to entice people in, to be honest. Pucks, where would you sit with this?
With my hypothetical PS5, I think I'm basically on both of your mindsets, if I'm honest. Again, it also depends on kind of what Luke was saying there, like what exactly does classic games offer and how well do they run effectively. Or like any modern console that is, more than capable of running emulation software under the hood or something. It's like, these systems are easily capable of running PS1 and PS2 emulation. But yeah, no, if it was me, my hypothetical PS5 would be with PS Plus Extra.
Yeah, they seem to have pitched it in a weird way. I just don't think those extra 3 things are worth... I know it's only $3 a month, and it's probably, what's that, £2.50, I guess. But yeah, seems an odd one to me. I thought they might have... Go on.
I think the game trials one is a weird one as well, because, I mean, even with Xbox, I know Xbox do game trials, but personally, I've never given a shit about them. Like, I've never attempted a trial at all, either because it's at weird times and I'm just never interested in what the trial is. I've played the game, so it doesn't matter,
Where would you sit on this one, Scott, just quickly before we round up? Oh, are you still there, Scott?
Apologies, I had my mic muted there. Probably the extra as well. Because streaming, I use it on Xbox, but I'm not going to stream 2 different from two
Right.
different consoles. Classic games, no interest. Same for Nintendo Switch Online. And game trials, well, I do occasionally take advantage of those on EA Play. So, for example,
Okay.
I made the decision not to buy Battlefield 2042 based on the
Okay.
trial from EA
That
Play.
saved you a few quid.
Yeah, but as someone who obviously didn't have PS4, the game catalog, especially if it has, some of those games in like Last of Us, God of War, for example, that would be something that would interest me.
Yeah, it's surprising they didn't entice people into the top tier with something a little bit more than that, if I'm completely honest. But that's fine by me. It's going to be, a little bit cheaper per month. Do we have a time scale for this? And is this just a rumor at the moment, or is it kind of been squared up as confirmed?
So it's just coming out like this evening from Jeff Grubb on Grub Snacks, is sort of show just for Giant Bomb. So it's certainly not official, but it does sound like it's fairly imminent from what people are saying. So maybe in the next month or so. So yeah, we should know more officially soon.
Looks quite realistic, doesn't it? And it makes me wonder. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily include all first-party titles day and date either. Like you say, it is kind of just a mixture of PS Now and PlayStation Plus, I guess. So, yeah. I'll tell you what, if the premium had day and date first party titles, even if it was $20 a month, I think people would be going for that, to be honest. But okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I think we'll round up the show there. We kind of went off piste a little bit, but interesting topics, and I do like the little ad hoc kind of conversations that spring out of the larger topics and stuff. So thankfully, I've made it to the end of the show without collapsing. So thank you for putting up with any coughing and stuff that you heard. GPG Crew, thank you very much. As always a delight. It's always great to chat to you guys. It's just, it's just four guys chatting about gaming, really, with some people in the chat joining in as well. It's a fantastic experience, and we do love doing it. Apologies for not being able to do it last week. There are other sort of things and commitments going on, but as ever, it's been an absolute pleasure having you guys on. Chat, you've been fantastic. Thank you for being here. Hopefully world events, hopefully this has taken your mind off world events. And like I say, gaming is a great experience to escape real life sometimes and to go into these fantastic and wonderful worlds. So hope everyone has a fantastic week. Hopefully we'll be back next week and we'll have some more topics to talk about. Thank you everyone for being here. Chat, you've been fantastic. GPG Crew, you've been even better. And we'll see you on the next one.